Are you at a crossroads in life facing a major life transition? Whether it's relationship changes or, your career shifting, it can be really challenging and scary to navigate and maneuver through the way that life, ebbs and flows. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, how your money mindset and the evolution of it can really empower you to transition with more ease and to design the life that you dream of and desire. You'll want to stick around because we'll be talking about the key insights and things that you want to keep in mind as you are creating financial freedom for yourself and your family and really preparing yourself for all the different ways life is going to life. Today's special guest is Nikki Alfaro, a woman on a mission to live a peaceful, prosperous, purpose-filled life. And let me tell you, she has become debt-free twice. You heard me right, not once, but 2 times. And she's going to be sharing with us the evolution of her money mindset, as well as just some life transitions that she's been through. And so what's really exciting is that we're going to discuss the career shifts that she's had from, hospitality to marketing and PR, and from mortgages when she was making, I think, more money than she ever had before, to intentionally taking a pay cut to prioritize her well-being, but also so that she could work in nonprofit and start her own businesses. So if this is anything that might interest you, I know that this is going to be a gem-packed conversation. You want to stick around for every single nugget, and let's dive right in. Welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited because we met probably about a month or so ago, right?
Yep.
At a Women Decision Makers event, which is a, morning breakfast meetup for boss women in Las Vegas. And I remember you came up to me at the end and it was a conversation about like money and marriage. And you mentioned just, how much it resonated with you and how much you wanted to just stay connected and collaborate. I think I had mentioned to you at the time too, that I was like, I'm in a no season. And so I wanted to just be transparent and like straightforward. Right.
Yep.
But I was like, let's see what happens. And so since we've recorded a podcast episode for your channel as well, Life with Nick. So use the link in the description to subscribe.
Thank you.
Because that episode was amazing, right? So you don't want to miss
good.
that. But I'm excited to dive into just like money mindset, your journey, and this idea of transitions, which I think is going to resonate with so many women because life is full of transitions.
Girl, you're telling me. It's like the only thing that's constant. Yeah.
So that's going to be, I think something that's going to touch the hearts of like women who are dealing with something right now, right? So there's so many different types of transitions and everyone has their version, but I would love to kind of do a timeline, right? Okay. Starting with how you grew up learning about money or not learning about money, and then dipping into like your professional career to where you are now. And so I think that will be a nice framework for us to have the context for everything that you've been able to accomplish, but also that you're continuing to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
So growing up.
So I was born and raised in Las Vegas. Both of my parents are originally from the Philippines. And that was one of the things that I had resonated with you too, because I know like you come from Uganda. Sorry, not Uganda?
Yeah, Uganda.
Uganda. Okay,
you got it right, girl.
Okay.
Trust your intuition.
I was like, wait a second. Okay, yes. And I just, when you were talking about just growing up in a country with a completely different economic system, that was my parents. And they were able to come here. My dad served in the U.S. military. My mom met him when she was working on base in the Philippines. And so growing up, like, it was like that typical household in the 90s. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about religion, and you definitely don't, like, ask your parents, like, questions about how they're figuring life out, right? Mm. And so growing up, I think I really didn't know much about money other than the fact that you got to work really hard, get a good job, make great money, and save. There was never really talks of investing. There were never really talks of like how to manage credit, how to really get ahead in life. And I think part of it is you realize as you become an adult, like your parents are just trying to figure it out too. And they can only teach you what they know. And now, you know, both my parents are like very successful. They're both entrepreneurs, but that was like the later half of their life. So I feel like we're all learning about just different fundamentals of like building wealth and money at the same time, which is very interesting.
Okay. And I feel like that is kind of like the story that a lot of people grow up with, right? And so there's so much that, especially then if we start talking about like being an immigrant and like having family from a different place, so many nuances that come along with that, right? And so, like you mentioned, our parents are only giving to us what they have to give,
Yeah.
and as much as they know. And it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It just is.
Yeah.
So for you, as you are kind of becoming a young professional, right, you've had those career shifts
Yep.
from quite different industries.
Yes. I feel like I was telling you earlier, like, I feel like I've lived so many different lives in the last 10 years that it's like crazy to think that all of this has happened in the last 10 years. You know, I graduated college when I was 22. I just turned 32. And, you know, since then, I feel like I've been in like 4 or 5 different careers since then. And I think over time, and it really hit me in my first job, because my first job out of college, I got a nightlife marketing position working at one of the top nightclubs at the time in Vegas. And, you know, when I was in college, you like romanticize the idea of like what you think you want to do. But when you have no idea, of course, like, you know, working in a fast-paced environment or like somewhere like in Vegas, we live in the entertainment capital of the world. Like you get to meet celebrities, there's access, like, and it's fun, especially when you're in your early 20s. But after a while, I realized that I'm like, okay, I'm overworked. I'm severely underpaid. The environment being nightlife, you know, you're working in the office and then you're at the clubs all night. And yes, like I got to work with like really cool celebrities. Like one of my favorite celebrities to this day that I will always talk about is like how Travis Barker is like the coolest person to work with because he's so humble. He's really nice, not a diva. But somehow I still found myself like driving home like every night, like crying my eyes out because I'm like, okay, no one told me that this is what it was supposed to be like after you graduated from college. You know, no one told me. I was like, what am I doing this all for? Like, I got the degree partially because it's like, you know, you want to make your parents proud. Thankfully, no student loan debts. Like, I owe that all to my parents. Like, that was their goal, was to send their kids to school without student loans. But at the same time, I was like, how am I going to do this for the rest of my life? And I think that's when I really started asking questions about, like, did I make the right move? Like, with this career path, with this degree. At the time too, I was really like just searching for something deeper in my life. And now looking back at it, like I just realized I had such a God-sized hole in my heart. And, you know, I grew up going to church and like, but I didn't have that relationship with God that I have now. And I think too, as like a new believer at that time, I was like starting to ask questions like, is this the path that God like created me to walk on? Like, how do I know I'm in alignment? Like, I was just starting to ask all these questions. So naturally you go through like this existential crisis at like 23 and you're like, what the heck am I doing? You know? And so all that to say, like, it was around that same time that I was like, I don't think this is it. I have no desire to become like a director of marketing for a nightclub. I wasn't married, no kids, no mortgage, like very little debt, like very little credit card debt. So it was the first time I paid off my debt, which was like not even $3,000. It wasn't anything. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this time now because I can, and I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to travel. And that's what I did for about 1.5 years. And it was the first time that I thought about what first, like, it was such a faith journey because I really had to just like put my life like in God's hands, like that security, let go of that control, let go of like the opinions of what people will think, especially my parents, because they're like, you're the kid that I wasn't worried about. What's going on? And yeah, I think during that time, I was grateful for that year and a half. But also being in your early 20s, like you think you know what you want and you don't always do things the right way. So I definitely got into debt during that time again.
Yeah.
Because, doing freelance like marketing and PR, like it's not going to pay all the bills. Mm-hmm. But I still wanted to keep this going because I just felt so like strong in my spirit that I was like, I need to see the world. Mm-hmm. Like I hadn't left Vegas. I didn't go to school in another state. So I really felt it was that time to really, really like find that like purpose that I think I was seeking in my heart prior to leaving. So yeah.
That's significant. I love that you mention taking a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Right? And really allowing yourself to like walk the talk, because I think it's easy to say that you have faith, or you know what I mean? Like to say that you believe in something, but to let that be a practice and let your action kind of show that in such a huge way, like leaving your job, like traveling when you didn't really have all of it figured out is huge. I'd love to know, like for you, what made you courageous enough to actually take, because I think people think these types of things, they fantasize about like quitting and like going to live their life, and so many people want to travel. What made you courageous enough to actually do it?
I think it was a number of things. First, I think I had said it out loud in a room of like 30 women. So I feel like, okay, well now I have to follow through. Like I can't be that person that doesn't have like not like walking what I'm saying I'm going to do. So I think part of it was like a pride and conviction thing. The second part, I think, too, was with that same association of women. So at the time, friends of mine had created this movement. It was called Mission I'm Possible, turned into this like huge thing. It started with like us running at Desert Breeze Park, and fast forward, like opened in other cities. We were doing like nonprofit work, serving like our homies in the streets. And it really was just like a faith building community. And I was seeing a lot of my peers around me also just going for it. Mm-hmm. And I think when it goes to show like, yeah, your association really is everything. And I think I look back at that time and the people that were involved in that organization, and I was like, wow, like so many of us really propelled because of that association of friends who just believed in you, prayed over you, but also maybe even new people that are trying to do what you're trying to do, mm-hmm. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And also like, I was like, when am I going to do it? Mm-hmm. I think when I was sharing with what I wanted to do with like people who were older than me, they were like, yeah, you need to do that. Cause they're like, if I was your age, like if I was at a place where you are at now, like I would 100% do it, because you can always come back to a job.
Yeah.
Like you could always like pivot, what's to say like where you would be like once you're on the other side. And I think at the time too, I was just dealing with just severe like control issues, mm-hmm. like just over my life, and experiencing like performance-based anxiety to the point where I was like, I really just need to just like let go of the reins a bit.
Yeah.
And really see what this like leap could take me. Because what's the worst that could happen? Mm-hmm. And I think just even taking the leap to travel alone, I was alone majority of the time.
Wow.
I think I needed to do it to be able to build a different level of confidence that like I have now because of it. Mm-hmm. And not just like in myself, but in the world, because the world can be a scary place. It's a lot different now than it was, back in 2015. But at the same time, I just think you realize like people are just human, you know, we're all here. Like a lot of us just like want to love and want to be loved, and, wanting to seek joy, purpose. Like we're all here trying to do the same thing and really just live life. So yeah.
Kudos to you. That's serious. I think 2 questions come to mind. First question is, was it worth it?
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. It was worth it.
And then second question is, where did you go? Like, where were you traveling?
Yeah. So it was a mix of like domestic and international. So when I first quit somewhat prematurely, but I say that because I had this plan to leave at the end of the year. And when I ended up quitting my job, it was in July. But I'm so happy that I did quit in July because I started my trips in Portland, Oregon, where my brother had just moved to. And even just starting my travels in Portland, where it was the first time I had been unemployed since I can remember, to slow down and like really be okay with not having such a scheduled day.
Yeah.
And also, it was such a sacred time for me because, you know, my brother had moved away for college. He decided not to move back home after he moved to Portland. And so this was just a time for me to really just form a better relationship with my brother. So started there and then made my way to like Chicago. Like I was in a long distance relationship at the time. So that was in like back and forth to San Diego. And then my first international travel was actually in September of that year. And I really wanted to go to Europe. I had never been before. And my mom, one of her best friends, like had already had a trip to Italy planned. And so I was like, hey, I've never been to Europe before. Do you mind if I crash your Italy trip? And then I'll just be on my way and figure my way out, you know? And it was the first time I booked an inbound flight into one country and then was leaving out of another one. And so everything in between was not planned or scheduled. So I really could like wake up and be like, I'm going to go to Paris today. And that's what I did. Or I'm going to go
I just got goosebumps. I don't know if it's cold in the room or like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That sounds so wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, so the Italy trip, so we road tripped the entire northern half of Italy. And one of my favorite moments of that trip was his family's originally from Italy. And his grandmother immigrated to the United States when she was young, never went back. So they had roots there, but never really like knew family that stayed. And long story short, his mom had given us some birth certificates and we were like, okay, well, maybe if we're like near an area, we can like drive around, see what's up. Long story short, we found the town that his grandmother was born in. And then we found their entire long lost family.
Shut the front door.
I remember sitting here, like, I was like, this is like a movie. And they're all speaking Italian. They had like a granddaughter that spoke English that translated between everyone. And like, it was crazy. I just remember sitting there and I was like, wow, God, like that was so cool, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like the highlight for Italy. Then, like I said, I went to Paris, and that was an incredible time because I feel like in Paris, I was able to meet two women to this day, like have impacted my life, especially with my faith. They were very, like they couldn't have been more different, but I think the thing that really tied them together was like their conviction for the Lord and like for them to really like live their faith out loud. And they were also just very unapologetic about like who they were, like the confidence that they carried, not like in any kind of arrogance, but just like that cool, stable confidence. And I was like, I want that, you know? And then when after that, I had gone to Budapest, Hungary, which I recommend everyone go to Budapest. They call it like the Paris of Eastern Europe.
Whoa.
It was so cool. That was the first time I had stayed in a hostel, like really truly was by myself. But you know, like I learned like through my travels is that you never are traveling alone. Whether you meet a friend or like when I was in Paris, I ran into some friends from Vegas and then reconnected with them after Budapest, met them in Amsterdam. They were like, we're coming to Amsterdam for Amsterdam Music Festival. You should just come crash in a hotel and like have fun. And then one of their guy friends, like at the time lived in Germany. They're like, you have to end up in Frankfurt so he can just drive you to Frankfurt. Like, it's just so funny how like
it just works
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was just something that I learned like just during that time in Europe is that it will always work out. And like the people that you meet, like it just enriched my life on such a different level. Like that was the first time I think I travel to different places, and when I'm at a bar, like the first thing someone asks you isn't what do you do? And I got to learn just like how content people really are like in their daily lives. Like they're not, it's different from like this American hustle that I think we've picked up. And it really like, I really had to like dig deep in that trip, like what really fuels me, and like really detach myself from like a title or any kind of like career, like building thing.
Oh my goodness. So some of the things I'm hearing you say so far are that it's really important to let go.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, know in some way that things are going to be aligned and work out for you beyond your understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what it sounds like.
Yep.
And to be courageous and take the leap based on the intuition that you have or the little voice that you hear inside or a message that you get from your maker or whatever the case is. That courage is how you should show up in certain transitions.
Yeah.
To help you get through it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how you kind of broke it down in that way. Because I feel like that's just been the underlying theme of like my life, like as an adult, which is funny. It's so funny how that always happens. It's like just little themes of your life. And even though things change, it's funny how, those things always come up.
Wow. So you live your best life.
Yeah, I'm living my best life.
Traveling the world.
Traveled. I mean, after Europe, I got to spend like a month in Asia, traveled to different places there. Also had a crazy serendipitous moment. Yeah, experience. I was in Thailand. And long story short, I had a friend that had gone 9 months before me. She met this incredible monk named Bin Bin.
So love a monk.
8 months later, I'm in Chiang Mai and I'm at this temple with like 30 monks, like just having a conversation about Buddhism. Like I'm a new Christian at the time. I'm curious.
Right.
And I look over and I was like, hey, is that monk's name Bin Bin?
No way.
And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I know him. I know this Bin Bin. Get him over here. And the monk next to me, and he was like, you're lucky. He's like, Bin Bin's not from this temple. He just happened to be here that day.
That's next level.
Yeah. And he like walked over because they're like, Bin Bin, get over here. Like you're famous in America. She's heard of you.
Famous in America. Famous monk.
And he was like, he's so cute. He was like, he brought his little notebook out and he's like, would you like to hear about the meaning of life? And it was just like such an enriching 2.5 conversation.
Oh my, you're making me feel like booking a trip right now. Cut the cameras. I'm leaving. No, but really though. Gosh, traveling I think is just the best teacher in life.
It is.
It really opens your eyes to the world being not about you. You know what I mean? And
it shows how small you are.
Right.
Right? Like, and like in my faith, right? Like we came from dust. And sometimes it's like when you're stuck in your own world, especially if you haven't traveled or if maybe you don't have the courage to, it's like your whole worldview changes when you get to travel to different places. And I will say like the tail end of like my travel, like during that travel time, and it was one of like the last international trips I took was actually to South Africa.
Okay.
And I look back at that time, this was like 6 years ago. We had friends that got married on safari.
What?
It was epic. It was like 30 of us.
What?
I highly recommend if you want to book a destination wedding, do it in South Africa and then have your honeymoon in the Seychelles because that's what I would have done.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm already married, but I might get married again.
I know. My husband and I talk about it all the time.
My husband used to work in South Africa. Like, Alpha, you gonna take me to get married again in South Africa, and then we can honeymoon in the Seychelles, and we can leave the kids with my cousin because he lives in South Africa.
There you go.
Okay. This is beyond me. I'm just beside myself because now the travel bug has truly bit. Wow. So then you wrap your travels up and then you come back, and I assume that you like, what is that like? You know, going from traveling for a year and a half to America, what was next for you?
I was like, okay, so at first I've always been that Vegas kid where I was like, I am not going to stay in Las Vegas. I am going to leave the second I can, whatever opportunity that I can. And so at that time, I was convinced that I would be moving to Portland and going to work for Nike. Like that was my next move after. And then I was like, I started looking online, like with my job experience and like the industry I wanted to get into. And I was like, you don't make anything in the line of work that I wanted to work in.
Wow.
Especially in another state compared to what I was making in Nevada. But the cost of living is like higher. So much higher. Oh. And I was like, oof. Like, I don't know. Like that was something like, I don't know if I used as such a crutch and a comfort, like coming in to Las Vegas because we're so spoiled. But despite, you know, whether I'm in debt or paying off debt or like trying to level up in my finances, like that is something I don't think, like, I have not had the courage to do that yet. And I say that, like, you know, humbly, because I'm like, I'm just not willing to, I guess, like, I didn't want to struggle.
Yeah.
Like, in that way.
Yeah.
You know, especially coming out of a season where, like, I was making like $500 a month, mind you, and then trying to travel and then like racking up all this debt at the time. And I was like, man, like, how do I get out of this hole? So then I was like, okay, if I really want to go to Portland, I will try to work at the Vegas pools for a year. Because, you know, you make a lot of dough working at the pool in the summer. And that was my plan initially. And I ended up it didn't work out with the pools. So I actually ended up working for a local juice bar out here. And I wanted like very minimal responsibility. I still wanted to travel, but I needed to start paying off that debt. And it kind of just, like, I ended up staying here a lot longer than what I intended, but everything in my life that I can attribute to, like, that's such a blessing, like, is here in Vegas. So I'm really grateful that I made that decision. Like, I don't know where my faith would be if I didn't stay in Las Vegas. I met my husband here in Las Vegas. I met such incredible people too that I think have really shaped my worldview even more, which is ironic because I thought I could only get that from traveling. I thought I could only get that in other countries, but I've met so many incredible people here that I just knew it all happened for a reason.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, you went and traveled and it changed your perspective and way of seeing the world, but you brought that with you. You take that with you wherever you go. So no matter where you go, you now have a set point, right? As far as your mindset and the way that you see things, that you'll probably find it wherever you go because that's what you've opened yourself up to, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then things didn't go as planned. Sounds like life. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds just like life.
Yeah, and you know, and so I found myself working at this juice bar, and I, you know, wherever I'm at, I really try to identify, you know, who could lead me in this season. And at the time, it was the owner of this juice bar. Like, she's an incredible entrepreneur in town. Learned a lot from her, and I were very alike too, at least at that time. So I just really felt like I could really learn a lot from her. Like, she's just like a badass businesswoman. She's a mom, and just everything that she stood for values-wise, I was like, I want that. And so I found myself, like, you know, 3 weeks into this job, and I was like a glorified barista, like, basically. And she was like, hey, have a family emergency, have to run out of town, but you got the store, right? And, like, it wasn't like, you know, in exactly those words, but basically that's the conversation that was made. And so she gave me all, like, the checklists and things to make sure things, like, and she's like, I'll be back, you know, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, then, you know, as time went on, was like helping her run this store. And I was learning a lot, like, really grateful. I was learning that, like, I don't know if I'm, like, made to manage people. Like, I was really young, was put in a position where I didn't really, like, I knew how to do my job well. But at the time, like, I was not meant to, like, lead this team. Like, looking back at it now, like, I was probably a really bad manager. And, but I was living at this place. Like, this place became my home to a point where sometimes people come in and they're like, oh, are you the owner?
Wow.
Because I really, like, take ownership, and I really take pride in what I do no matter what my job position is, you know? And it was getting to a point where, like, you know, she's talking about growth and, like, where she sees the company in the next 5 to 10 years. And I was like, that's awesome. I want to go there with you. And we had to have a conversation where I was like, you know, I will work 20 hours here. Like, I will be the hardest worker that you have. But is there any way you'd be open? Like, if you can't pay me the salary that I want, is there, like, opportunity for equity? Because at least, like, if I know I'm going to give my life to this place, I want to to show something for it. And I also want to learn from, like, an incredible entrepreneur, because someday I want to do that too. Yeah. Maybe not in this capacity. And she was like, I love you. I want this for you. We're just not there yet. And I was like, she's like, maybe in like 5 years. And it's crazy because like if I would have stayed, like 5 years later, they're not open anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of around the time too, you know, I had mentioned to you, like I had gotten connected up with people who were also entrepreneurs who loved to mentor others to really show them like there are other ways than just trading time for money in order to build wealth. And I knew that, you know, like my parents created wealth through real estate. My dad's in financial services. Like I understood that there were other ways to make money, but I had no one in my corner that can be like, hey, let me show you how to do that.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I can't, if I'm going to be here all day, every day, how am I going to figure out how to build my life? So that's how I got into mortgages.
Oh my goodness. What a story. I feel like there needs to be like a Netflix series on this. Okay. So first, a couple of questions, because tactically I'm thinking about someone watching and they're saying, okay, you've gotten to the point or you were able to pay off $36,000 at some point, right?
Yeah.
Total over the course of years.
Yes.
Tactically, how did you do that?
Up until 2020, I literally, I mean, the basics, right? Like I was learning like a zero balance budget, you know, basically like Dave Ramsey principles. Like I didn't cut up my credit cards, but put them away for a while, use cash envelopes, like was trying my best to live below my means, but like really gritting my teeth through it, you know, because I think up until 2020, like the most money I ever made was maybe $49,000. So I was just slowly tacking it. And then come 2020, when like the whole world is like upside down and like no one knows what's happening. At the time, like I was a loan officer assistant and I wanted to be a loan officer assistant. I didn't want a commission only job because I'm like, I got debt to pay. Like, I don't want to be in this like commission life and, you know, be so stressed out about making a paycheck. And so, at the time, like, yeah, like we didn't know what was going on. This was March of 2020. And this was like barely the beginning of like the refi boom and like the real estate market getting crazy. And I remember having my first month and I was like, oh, like, I think I can do this. Like, you know, if the business like keeps going. And so I was like, okay, if we're going to stay at home, like before we get back to the office, like I want to get my actual mortgage loan officer license because God knows what's going to happen in 6 months. Like my boss at the time could be like, I can't afford an assistant, you know, like you're not licensed. So in my head, like he never said this to me, but in my head, I was just trying to prepare for like the worst. So I was like, well, he wouldn't let me go if I was maybe one of his loan officers. So that's what I did. Like I got my license. And then within like that like last 6 months of the year, I mean, it was an incredible year for everyone. Like it's undeniable. And I had never made that much money in my entire life. I remember like there was one, he was like lining up like all of like my closings for the month and we get paid like biweekly based on the closings in those 2 weeks. And between those 2 weeks, he was like tallying up. He's like, yeah, like this check will be $17,000 if you become a loan officer right now. And I was like, I've literally have never made that much money in a paycheck in my entire life. Yes, switch me over. I'm going commission only.
It's fine. I'll do it.
So it was definitely the help of like increasing my income for sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm, you know, as disciplined as you can be, sometimes you do have a money problem. And if you want to really like expedite that, and I know that's something that you did too around that same time, like, yeah, you really have to increase your income and still implement those discipline habits.
Right, because you could increase your income and spend it all. So.
Yeah, I mean, I increased my income, paid off my debt, and I didn't buy a new car.
Okay.
Everyone in my office bought a new car.
Oh.
Or bought a new house. I didn't. Because I just didn't know.
Right.
Which I'm glad I didn't because, you know, I'm not making that kind of money now. And I'm grateful that I didn't create like an insane monthly overhead because I wouldn't be able to make the decision to go to nonprofit if I had done that.
Oh, the gems, y'all. If you haven't already been taking notes, if you haven't already subscribed to Life with Nick and then came back to finish this conversation, you playing games in your financial freedom journey, and it's fine because it's on you. But we care about you and we want to see you winning with money. Now, I guess really the question is, you are making all this money.
Yeah.
You pay down your debt.
Yep.
If you like, how were you able to walk away from making that much money?
That's a great question.
You're like, I'm going back.
I'm like, now I feel like I'm in the hot seat. I'm like sweating. No. Okay. So there was a few things. I would say that me leaving this industry this year, it wasn't an overnight decision. It was something that I was marinating on for a while. And it's actually funny because even in 2020, when I was making all this great money, I finally had paid off my debt and I was trying to stack money away. Like the amount of stress that I had put my body to, no one put this on me. Like not my boss. Like he was a great, great boss. Mm-hmm. We weren't in that sales environment that was super toxic. Like I was just grateful to, like be at that specific company. But I think the pressure I now put on myself, first you like walk into some kind of like imposter syndrome because you're like how am I even making this kind of money when like people haven't worked in 6 months? Like, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I made 17 grand last paycheck. How do I do that again?
Yeah.
You know, because you start from zero every 2 weeks. And then, and I remember my doctor at the time, I was like going through some health challenges prior to COVID and really trying to find like the root of the issue. So started going to a functional medicine doctor and they really like look at you from like inside out, top to bottom, just trying to find the root. And he was like, you know, the metrics apart from like blood work, he'll just like ask you, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how do you feel here? Like, do you think these treatments are working? Yada, yada. And he asked me, he's like, how long do you expect to stay at your job? Because, you know, we're doing all these things. Like, you're a healthy person, like for the most part.
Yeah.
But we need to get your stress under control. Like, have you considered like other jobs? And I was like, no, like I need this job. Like, I don't want to like go to grad school or, you know, like rebuild another career. Like after being in it for so long, like I'm staying in this. Like I was just like heels dug. I'm like, I was like, I think at the time I was believing, and I don't want to call it a lie, but I was like in this mindset at the time where I was like, yeah, I don't like doing this. I never wanted to get into mortgages. I was looking for a 9 to 5. Now I'm making this great money. But that's fine. I don't have to love what I do. I can love the life that this helps me finance to do. Cause you know, I was grateful for the amount that I was making at the time because it was able to fuel travel again. It was able to pour into ministries that I believed in. It gave me the time, like the flexibility to be able to like live my life outside of my job exactly how I wanted to, except for those 8 hours, which I didn't really work 8 hours a day. You don't work 8 hours a day in mortgages, except for 2020. So I think I was like trying to believe that, lie to myself that I didn't have to like love what I did for a living and that it was okay if I can love my life outside of that job, as long as that job financed that life.
Ooh, the layers.
Yeah.
The layers. So it wasn't a decision you made overnight.
No.
Your health really became, you know, one of the big deciding factors, it sounds like, and the realization or like the truth, right? So if you said you were believing a lie, it's like there was a truth. There was a truth was that like I just was not in alignment, you know, and it didn't mean that like, oh, because like my beliefs were XYZ that I couldn't have the title or work in this certain industry of like loans and mortgages and real estate. I just think, I think my body knew what my mind wasn't willing to accept. Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And it took like 2 years, I would say, to really like finally get off the fence and make a decision to leave.
So then in that time, that was when that you left that?
I just left mortgages this year.
Okay.
So I just made that decision this year. And it's funny because I remember like January 1st, it was like the first Sunday of the year. We're at church and, you know, I like to, you know, pick a word of the year and like pray that that's what my year is going to look like. Don't choose refinement if you don't want to go through the fire. I'm saying that now. So refinement was my word in 2021, went through the fire. 22, I was like, Lord, be gentle to me. I want restoration.
Okay.
And he restored. He really did restore in 2022, which I think in 2023 was able to like tee everything up for me to like, you know, leave that industry and come to where I'm at now. But yeah, I just remember earlier this year, I was just like, alignment. Like, I want to be aligned in everything, you know? And I thought that I was doing a good job, like, in being integritous, because I try to be the same person
Right.
in every room that I'm in. But, like, somehow I still feel like I was, like, faking it when I was in that job. Like, faking it. Like, this is the greatest place ever. This is the greatest job ever. But I was like, I think it's like I was trying to like coach myself through, like telling myself, like, if I say it enough, I'll start to believe it. But again, like my body knew.
Right. And your body was not about to lie.
It was not about to lie. It was crazy. And then I think about too, I think apart from health, and I had explained this when I was talking to my boss about like, hey, like I'm going to leave. Like, you know, I'm accepting this position at this place now. I just said, look, I'm really grateful for the 6 years that I've been able to be in this industry, learn from him. He was an incredible boss and mentor as well. And I'm grateful that in these last 3 years, I was able to, you know, go on that trip to Mexico with all the top producers, like make good money. But now, like when I wake up, I was like, the trip to Mexico isn't motivating to me.
Trip to Mexico ain't every day. It's like,
like, and I'm like, and I was like, what do I, like, what's going to get me to pull to continue to operate at this level, like in trying to make 6 figures every year?
Yeah.
Like, what was that going to look like? And being in this industry any longer, I think too, I thought myself, I knew from the beginning it was going to be a means to an end. And I didn't know when I was going to find my husband. I don't know when we're going to have children, but I knew I did not want to start a family with that kind of job.
Gotcha.
And I knew, like, with what my husband and I, like, the vision that we have for our life in wanting to have more time freedom, wanting to leverage media. I didn't want to be, like, a mortgage person on social media.
Yeah.
Like, so many do it, but that just, like, I didn't want to, like, niche myself to that area.
It wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me. It wasn't aligned. And so, yeah, I thought about it. I'm like, if I pivot now before we have kids, so we can now build.
Yes.
So then by the time we do have a family, we have like we're just after a life of choice, I think, at the end of the day. And like in my head, I thought, I'm like, okay, because someone can say like, okay, well, you don't have kids yet, you know, you can work this, like make the money, like make the money now. I'm okay, like, well, okay, so how am I going to replace 6 figures if I'm busy making 6 figures here and not building a 6-figure business?
I see.
You know?
Oh my goodness.
Like that's
the
just
gems.
Yeah, that's where I was at. I think, you know, like all that to say, in these last 10 years, like I've had these different careers. I've had a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
And I think when I was younger, I was like, maybe I just picked the wrong path. Like maybe I'm not a marketer. Maybe I'm not in PR. Maybe I'm not in mortgages. And it's like, no, maybe I'm just like I'm not built to be an employee.
Okay.
Like, I think at the end of the day, I'm not. Like, just the desires I have in my heart, it doesn't fit in getting 2 weeks off a year.
Right.
Working 5 days a week and getting paid for what the position's worth, not what you're quote unquote worth. Because like you said on my podcast, you're priceless. So I'm like, okay, yeah, like it job, like there's nothing wrong with jobs.
Of course.
But the life that I want, I can't get it out of.
It's beyond that.
It's beyond that.
It's independent of that.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what you mentioned is the question you're asking yourself is like, is this not for me? Is it marketing? Maybe marketing's not for me. Maybe it's that. But maybe those were all stepping stones to help you get really clear on what you did want.
Yeah.
And I would assume that everything that you've learned along the way is stuff that you pull on and you use all the time in your own business. So it was really training, right, for you to be able to build your own, you know, profitable business to whatever level that you want, because you've, you know, essentially like learned under the tutelage of a 9-to-5 business, right? You got
Exactly.
paid to learn how to build now
Yep.
this season of your life,
Yep.
your own businesses. Now you're newly married in this season where you're living a life of choice. And is it perfect? Like, no, it's
No.
a constant process of
Yes.
growth and evolution.
Yeah.
And it forces you to be really honest with yourself to be able to do it with as much ease as possible. But I think a lot of the times people are thinking that, well, I just need my life to look like this. I just want to be able to, what is it called? Debt free, or I just want to be able to build my own. But of course, they're thinking that it's going to be like sunshine and rainbows the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's probably more challenging than anything else you've probably done.
I know. And it's funny too, because when I first decided to leave mortgages and go to nonprofit, they were like, and this, I'm not trying to be any form like negative or derogatory to my industry, because it is so meaningful. Like, I wanted to do more meaningful work for the time that however long I have to be an employee, I want to do meaningful work while I'm doing that. But I think some of the comments that I received, because it took people by surprise when I do that. They're like, so like, you're just gonna be poor? So like, do you not want a good life? Like, people just assume that
Right.
like I just couldn't handle like that industry.
Right.
That it now equated that like I settled for life. And I'm like, actually,
I'm going to go beyond. Thank you very much.
I'm like, I just pivoted. And I think people forget, it's like, no, like what I was actually seeking was like a job that I didn't have to like think at the end of the day, like where I was getting my paycheck from.
Right.
I knew that my husband and I had made this decision that I'm like, okay, like we can pay our bills. Like we are fine. But now I have the bandwidth
Yes.
to now make 6 figures another way.
Yeah.
And not just like this one way that encompasses my entire mind and life and time,
Yeah, I think it makes me think about how to build sustainably, right? When we talk about like wealth starting with wellness. Yes, you can build wealth in the industry that you are in, and maybe for some people it isn't as stressful or whatever. Like they
love it.
They're
you
built
have
for
to
it,
love
right?
It,
Exactly,
you
right?
have to love it.
But maybe that wasn't the industry for you,
Yeah.
which you knew going in.
Yeah.
And so it was really, yes, that was one way for you to build wealth, but it wasn't the most sustainable, healthy way for you to do it, especially considering starting a family and different things like that you made the choice. And I got goosebumps when you said it, because you thought ahead, you saw the future.
Yeah.
And then you came back to the moment and made choices in the moment that align with the future, as opposed to what's right in front of you is that you're getting paid really well and, whatever the case is. But like, I'm thinking about you when you, do become a parent, if so you choose and, are able to, like how your life is going to be different. Like, because now I'm living the future I saw years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is crazy.
It's so amazing.
I just want more women to have that, And
Right.
so I'm so happy to hear that you're making the life-changing choices in the moment, and they're not the big choices. People think that it's these massive choices that you have to make that are going to shift your life. And it's really these like micro, everyday choices that you make that are going to take you the direction that you want to go in the long term, but they seem so like boring and mundane in the moment.
And sometimes it doesn't make sense to other people because they're not living your life. Like,
of course.
And everyone's vision is different. And I think that was something that even I had to really check myself on. Because I was like, okay, yeah, like how the heck are you going to make this happen?
Yeah.
Like I think even leading up to it, I was like, man, like, why do I spend like, 5+ years, like trying to build something? I think that's why like that, it took that 2 years for me to really jump off the fence. Cause I was so scared that I was going to continue to climb up ladders that I was not meant to climb and that I was going to be wasting time. Because now it's like, yes, like age is but a number. Like, we're a lot healthier. I feel like we're more youthful now and we're in our 30s. But at the same time, I was like, I heard someone say this. I was like, because, it's like you're trying to build this life. You want to build a legacy and like, it's not going to happen overnight. But like also, I want to be young, rich, and free. Like, I don't, like I'm not afraid to say that.
Yeah.
Like my husband, we were like filming content and he was like trying to like, prompt me.
Okay.
And he's like, what are you passionate about? And I was like, I'm passionate about not being poor. Like, but like also passionate about like being bougie and like, you know, like I want all those things and I want them like when I'm youthful and when I'm strong and healthy and like not trying to enjoy it in like the last like few years of my life, you know?
Yeah, so deep. I love that. Okay, you're a fast pass kind of girl. I
am.
That's like what I call it, right? Because I like the fast pass too.
Yes.
Okay, we want to skip the line, and that's why it's so important. The question that you had mentioned that really stuck out was, who can lead me in this season? Because every season in your life, you can choose to like wait in line, or you can choose to have the fast pass.
Yeah.
And I think asking the question makes you open to seeing who that teacher is in whatever form they might come to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I love that in this season, right, that we're getting ready to, hopefully, you know, have you join our community.
Yes.
And
the decision has been made.
we're going to be able to like walk this next season together to really ensure that you have the fast pass, that you're not trying to figure out on your own how to build your business, build your life, make sure it's in alignment, and center all of it around your well-being.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're irreplaceable. So just like the people that told you, you know what I mean, when you were getting ready to potentially take that leap of faith, was like, yeah, jump, go, do it. Because at the end of the day, you can always go back to a job. Like, jobs are everywhere all the time.
Jobs are everywhere because apparently no one wants to work.
Nobody wants to work. I get it. I think about getting jobs all the time, but then I'm like, nah. Like you, I was not built to be an employee.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a huge thing that so many women don't do. I think, like you mentioned, like fear holding someone back from like finding what support could look like for them. And it could be your pastor, it could be an auntie, it could be, you know, like a neighbor or something like that. But like, what for you helped you make a decision like, okay, I know I'm in a transition in this season of my life that's different than other transitions, being married, starting your own businesses, all of that, to say, okay, I want the fast pass, as opposed to saying, I'm going to do it by myself?
You know, throughout my entire life, I've never tried to get ahead by myself. And it's not to say that, you know, I can't help myself. I just know that there is a value to being able to, and it's very humbling to reach out to someone and say, hey, I need help on this. Or like, I don't have all the answers. Like, can you teach me? Like, I think though I graduated college 10 years ago, like I'm a forever student. And so for me, and that was really the basis of my podcast as well, is like, you know, a lot of the people on there are people that I've learned so much from, you know, and maybe they don't realize like how much they've impacted my life, but it's like, I'm constantly learning from the people around me. But there is a value to me about reaching out to people that are further ahead in life than you are, who are willing to teach you, show you, answer the questions, not gatekeep. Like, I'll take full advantage of that. Like, why not? Like, you know, like I think people are so afraid to ask like people questions of like, how did you get here?
Yeah.
Or like my business partner and I really want a commercial building right now. And it's like, I know nothing about commercial real estate. And I'm just like, you know, I think I'm grateful that I have the boldness to just ask and not be afraid to ask. Because what's the worst that can happen? That they just tell me like buzz off, you know, like, but yeah, I don't think you could really get to where you want to go by yourself. And it's not just with the people around you. Like, to me, like I truly believe like God is going to get me there.
Yes.
Like, I really build my foundation in my faith and knowing like, okay, whether I made this decision to stay in mortgages, to hop off the fence, to really like, again, take the leap, you know, like I've had a lot of fork in the road moments of my life. But I think for me, it's asking God, like, Lord, like there's no right or wrong decision here, but please like be with me in this decision.
Yeah.
And if it's time to pivot, you have like stirred it in my spirit before. I know you will do it again, you know, because there's been countless times. And it's funny because it's like in those moments where like things didn't make sense to other people, but I just knew it was time to move on.
Yeah.
it could be a month later, a year later, a decade later, that place is either no longer in operation. Like maybe things come out. Like I remember, because when I was in mortgages, I worked at a federal bank prior to, and it was a small one, like in the Midwest. And like not even a year after I left, like the FBI.
Oh
like,
no. Oh no.
when you start everything with like the FBI and finance,
Yeah,
like,
that's bad.
Yeah, showed up to like the CEO's house. So I'm
no.
Thank God. I mean, I think that place is still in business, but
Right.
like,
yeah, you don't want to be associated. You don't want to be have anything fall out in your own situation.
Yeah.
Just sounds like trust. You're trusting.
trust. Yeah, it's really trust. And again, I'm like a recovering control freak. So it's like just letting go.
Listen, you're not alone. And I'm so excited to be just with you in the journey side by side, because it's we're in, like in the trenches together, except it's not trenches, right? Unless we're in trench coats. But it's really being able to like do life with like-minded people, like you mentioned, and just the difference it can make in being able to enjoy the process, but also hit the milestones, because it's not just about the end, it's about the experience and who you become. And so it's really this delicate balance between both, and it's easier to do in concert, right? Kind of like I don't know, a dance or a song, right? Being a part of a choir where everyone gets to kind of push each other and pull each other or cheer each other on. And that's what's really exciting. And so I'm really excited, because we're going to have you back at some point talking about telling us about commercial buildings. Like, I don't know, maybe you're going to be the one to tell us. But I would love for you to share, like, where can everyone find you? What can they expect on your podcast, Life with Nick? And we'll make sure all of that stuff is in the description, but I want them to hear it from you.
Thank you. Well, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is @life_with_Nick, or maybe life_with_Nick. I'll double check that. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is also Life with Nick. And just what you can find on that channel is, like I said, just we are all just people trying to figure it out. And I think once you realize that, like, I hope that encourages you to take that leap for yourself in whatever capacity that is. And that I really pray for, I think, myself, like, just a year from now, I know I could be sitting in this chair and be like, girl, cha-cha changes. Like, that is just like the theme of my life. And yeah, like, I think it is just, I think what you'll find on like my channel and my platform is that I'm very transparent. And I have this like current pull on my spirit right now, where I'm like, you hear all these podcasts with like different entrepreneurs or leaders in their space who've already made it.
Yeah.
And then they talk about the grind. They talk about like, oh yeah, like I sacrificed this, I sacrificed that. But you don't see it happening in real time.
Yeah.
And I am very like vocal about like all the things I go through, like not letting out dirty laundry and being annoying on social media, but more so like just being real. Like
honesty.
Yeah. How the heck am I going to get a commercial building? You will find out as I figure it out.
Perfect. Because I might want to get one too one day. So I'm going to be asking you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Everything will be linked in the description for you to be able to connect with Nikki at Life with Nick. Thank you again for being here and sharing your gems. Honestly, it's just so good to meet other women that are like-minded and want to create an impact in the world and be able to use money to, make your life better, but also to have purposeful work that you can contribute to. And so thanks for how you show up in the world. I'm watching, I'm learning, I'm listening, and the rest of the community is too. And until next time, when we get to chat about, all the rest of the fun things that are up in the air for us to accomplish.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm really honored, and I'm just excited to just take you on this journey with me. So